What you are about to witness is a real rarity. The same pattern, the same materials have been given to 8 different factories in New York City to produce a sample. This is the only real way to evaluate a factory and how they might produce something. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the review, it's occurred to me that this video may also be a meditation on expectations. There's a wide range of expectations in the world of fashion. I might be my current predicament because the previous factory I was with thought I was one of those designers with low expectations. Oh no, I have medium expectations, and I'd like to find a factory with slightly higher than medium expectations. I could settle for that. What am I expecting a factory to deliver? Fortunately, that's all in the pattern and the tech pack. But what about you? As a customer, what do you expect from a designer or brand? Think about that, because we will return to this question. However, here's to expectations. I hope this video raises yours, and I hope you are able to raise those of the status quo. Let's begin. So many clothes are vanity-sized. It's something I don't want. I want the waist to match the waist size. But it's so commonplace. I'm sure factories vanity-size by habit. On the other hand, just because the waist doesn't match exactly doesn't mean I'm going to eliminate this factory. Looking at the sample is just one aspect of this experiment. The other is to try to understand the sort of team I'm partnering with. I want a team that cares. I want confidence in that they're going to do the right thing in terms of making the garment and making the customers happy. In an earlier video, I mentioned how if a sample fits larger or smaller, it is almost certainly because the manufacturer did not follow the given seam allowance. It's a pretty common mistake, although the seam allowance is often quite clearly stated on the pattern and tech pack. As a result, when you measure across, you can see all the factories that used a smaller seam allowance have a larger leg opening. You may notice that 4 of the samples look different. That's because half of the factories were gracious enough to cuff and hem the samples for me. It's always nice to be able to work with a factory that has the flexibility and capacity to do a little more. That said, this factory cuffed it too short. The seam allowance at the top of the pants can also affect the width. Measurements and seam allowances are straightforward. That won't tell you much about a factory's experience. How they construct and finish the garment is a better indicator. Oh, and that was a clear mistake. There's no reason the waistband curtain should be below the fabric there. Here's footage of pants being constructed correctly. The waistband curtain covers the entirety of the waistband, including the center back. I'm not sure what happened on that sample and how it was missed. In looking at the front pockets, it's a bit disappointing that most factories seem to have ignored the instructions for the top stitch and bar tacks. Also note, this one factory has used white thread everywhere instead of matching color thread. I could specify the color thread in the future. On the back pocket, you can see one factory used a single welted pocket, and I'm not sure why. And I want to highlight the pockets from this factory. There's a gap between the top and the bottom, which you don't see on the others. Now regarding the bar tacks, the same 2 factories have put the bar tacks, but no one else has. Now regarding the instructions, I had actually forgotten to mention bar tacks should be applied to other areas, not just the front and back pockets. That said, maybe this is a good test to see a factory's level of experience, instead of just their ability to follow the instructions. If you look at the bottom of the fly, there ideally should be a bar tack. Seems the same 2 factories have applied it. And there should also be bar tacks on the belt loops. Some you can see the bar tacks on the top of the belt loop. On the others, the belt loops are attached differently, so the bar tacks aren't visible from the top, as they're on the underside of the belt loop. You can see the factory that applied the contrast stitching also stitched the belt loops like they would have in jeans. While we're here, you can see all the hooks and bars have been applied with different spacing. I did specify where on the pattern, but as long as the waistband is tight enough when worn, I really don't care. Also note, Some of the factories did not use the hooks and bars I provided. They must have used their own. Anyway, let's see how the pants look when worn and with the waistband closed. You can see that the edge is not completely straight on some of the pants, and so that can be attributed to the placement of the hook and bar. If you've been paying attention, there's only been one sample that has done everything I asked, so I'm not going to waste our time and restate the obvious. This is the one sample that gives me hope. It's not perfect, but I want to work with this factory going forward. One of the questions I wanted to answer from this experiment was, how well could I judge a book by its cover? How well could I predict the quality of a sample from a factory before receiving the sample? Here's how I grouped the 8 factories in my previous video, based on the initial impressions. And here's how they correspond with the sample.
Now, 1 out of 8 factories isn't so bad when you consider the fact that most people are inclined to try to cut costs and deliver a minimum viable product rather than focus on quality and putting in effort and trying to convince customers that they have a more valuable product. So for that reason, there's just a lot more supply of the former than the latter. They're 2 different markets, and I've tried the former. I don't think it suited me or my product. So we'll see how the latter goes. Hopefully, I'll be able to convince you and demonstrate that I am doing more and there's more thought and care put into the product. On that note, there's one thing the factory I selected did that the other 7 did not do. You can just barely make it out in the video, even though I didn't mention it. Now, if you noticed or want to take a guess, write it in the comments. It'll be something I talk about in a later video. Thank you.